Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales that we're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. Jim had always considered himself a patient man, a hard-working, devoted husband who did everything right, or at least that's what he had believed. Until tonight, the moment he stepped through the front door, the scent of his favorite meal hit him like a wave of nostalgia. Roast beef, perfectly seasoned, garlic mashed potatoes, even that little bottle of imported beer he liked, the one Melissa usually complained was too expensive. It was all laid out on the table, candles flickering, a romantic atmosphere carefully crafted. But Jim wasn't stupid. Something was off. Melissa stood there, smiling too wide, her eyes gleaming with something unnatural. Anticipation? Guilt? Satisfaction? "Hey you," she said sweetly, stepping forward to plant a soft kiss on his cheek. Jim stiffened slightly, but forced a smile. "What's the occasion?" Melissa giggled, brushing her fingers against his arm. "Oh, can't a wife do something nice for her hard-working husband?" Jim chuckled, but deep down, that uneasy feeling gnawed at him. He sat down at the table, picked up the cold beer, and took a slow sip, watching his wife closely. She was too fidgety, too eager. And then came the words that shattered his world. "Jim, we need to talk." He set his fork down, shoulders tensing. "Go on." She inhaled, her eyes dancing with a strange kind of excitement. "I love you. You know that, right?" Jim nodded warily. Melissa leaned forward. "But I feel like something's missing. I want more from life. More excitement. More passion." Jim's pulse quickened. He stayed silent, letting her keep talking. "I've been thinking about it for a while now, and I think it's time we open our marriage." The words felt like a slap. His fingers clenched around the beer bottle, knuckles turning white. "Open our marriage?" Melissa nodded quickly. "Yeah, explore things. Experience new people. It's just sex, Jim. You're still the only one I love." A sharp, bitter laugh escaped his throat before he could stop it. "Oh, that's rich. So, let me get this straight. You want to sleep with other men, but I get to keep the title of husband?" Melissa frowned slightly. "You're not understanding. It's about freedom, Jim. About being true to myself. I don't want to feel trapped in just one experience for the rest of my life." His heartbeat roared in his ears. A sharp, cold realization settled in his chest. She had already made up her mind. He wasn't being asked. He was being told. Jim leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "And what if I say no?" Melissa's lips parted, but she hesitated for a second. I hope you won't." Jim scoffed. "No, Melissa. What if I say no? What happens then?" Her face darkened, just a fraction. "I was hoping you'd support me. But if you don't, then I don't know how we can move forward." Jim's stomach twisted. That was it. The ultimatum. His wife, the woman he had loved, trusted, and built a life with, had already made her choice. And he was just an afterthought. Jim let out a slow breath, his mind racing. He could explode, demand answers, try to talk sense into her. But what was the point? She wasn't seeking permission. She was informing him. So, Jim did something unexpected. He smiled. Melissa blinked in surprise. "Wait, you're okay with this?" Jim took another sip of his beer, his expression unreadable. "Oh, sweetheart," he murmured. "I think it's a great idea." Melissa's eyes lit up in relief, her shoulders relaxing. "Oh, Jim, I knew you'd—" But Jim interrupted smoothly, setting his bottle down with a soft clink. "If we're doing this, then we're doing it right." Her brows furrowed. "Right?" Jim nodded, his gaze steady. "If you're going to sleep with other men, I think I should have the same freedom too." Melissa stiffened. I don't know if that's really necessary." "Oh, but it is." Jim leaned forward, his voice calm but cold. "You want freedom, right? We should both enjoy it." Melissa forced a smile, though something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. Jim hid his smirk behind another sip of beer. She thought she had control. She thought he would break. Oh, how wrong she was. She wanted an open marriage? Fine. He was about to give her one she'd never forget. Jim barely slept that night. He lay awake in the spare bedroom. Because, of course, Melissa had already assumed he would move out of their shared bed. She thought she had one. But she had no idea that her little victory was about to become the biggest mistake of her life. The next morning, Melissa was already up, humming softly in the kitchen as she made coffee. Jim walked in, running a hand through his messy hair. She looked up, her face beaming with satisfaction. "Good morning, baby," she said, as if everything was normal. Jim smirked, grabbing a coffee mug. "Morning. Sleep well?" Melissa giggled. "Oh, definitely. I feel so liberated." Jim sipped his coffee, watching her. "That's great. So, when's your first date?" Melissa paused mid-stir, a faint blush creeping onto her cheeks. "Oh, well, tonight actually. Linda and I are going out with some friends." Jim nodded. "So you already had this plan before you told me?" Melissa hesitated, then shrugged. "I mean, kind of, but only because I knew you'd understand." "Oh," she had no idea. Jim set his cup down. "Cool. Well, I have plans too." Melissa's brows furrowed. "Wait, what? You mean like a date?" Jim shrugged. "You said this is about freedom, right? No need to waste time. If we're doing this, we should go all in." Melissa's lips parted, a flicker of something in her eyes. Panic. "But Jim, I just meant that I wanted to." Jim tilted his head, eyes sharp. "Oh, so it's fine for you, but not for me?" She forced a chuckle. No. I didn't expect you to jump into it so fast." Jim smirked, leaning against the counter. "Melissa, you're the one who said we shouldn't be stuck in outdated ideas about marriage. I'm just following your lead." Melissa swallowed hard, gripping her mug a little too tightly. "Right, of course." Jim walked past her, grabbing his phone. "Well, I need to make some calls. See you tonight." As he walked away, he could feel her eyes on him. She thought she was in control. She thought she had power. But Jim was just getting started. Melissa left that evening, dressed to impress. She had spent hours getting ready, her excitement barely contained. She thought Jim would sit at home and stew in jealousy. She was wrong. Jim had his own plans. He sat at a bar across town, scrolling through his phone, considering his next move. He wasn't here to meet someone new. He was here to set a trap. Melissa wanted to act like she was untouchable, like he would just roll over and accept whatever she decided. But Jim was going to make sure she felt every ounce of what she had done. He had no intention of finding a date tonight. He had something much better in mind. He dialed a number. "Hey, man," he said, keeping his voice casual. "Remember how you always said Melissa was a little too friendly with some of the guys at work?" "Yeah, I need to know everything." There was a pause. Then laughter. "Jim, buddy, you sure you want to hear this?" Jim's grip tightened around his glass. "I need to hear all of it." And what he heard next made his blood boil. Jim sat in his truck, gripping the steering wheel as his friend's words replayed in his mind. Melissa's been getting cozy with Logan and Brian for a while now. Flirty lunches. Secret meetups. Hell, man, Linda's been encouraging her. She's been talking about testing the waters for months. Jim clenched his jaw. "And you're only telling me this now? I thought you knew." "Everyone at the office has noticed. But we figured, if you weren't saying anything, maybe you were okay with it." Jim exhaled sharply, trying to keep his anger in check. Melissa hadn't just sprung this idea on him last night. She had been planning this for months. Jim didn't answer for a long moment. Then, finally, he said, "Thanks for telling me." "You good, man?" Jim chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, I'm great." And he was. Because now he had proof. Melissa waltzed into the house around 2 a.m., heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She had been drinking, laughing, flirting. She didn't even try to be quiet. She probably assumed Jim was asleep, or worse, waiting up like some pathetic husband. Jim was neither. He sat in the living room, casually scrolling through his phone. Melissa froze when she saw him. "Oh, you're awake?" she asked, feigning innocence. Jim nodded. "Yeah. How was your night?" Melissa smiled a little too wide. "It was fun. We had a great time." Jim smirked. "Cool. How's Logan?" Melissa's smile flickered. "What?" Jim leaned back, crossing his arms. "Logan. And Brian. They treating you well?" Melissa's face paled. Jim held up a hand, stopping her. "Save it." Melissa swallowed hard. "I don't know what you think you." Jim cut her off again. "I know everything." Melissa's breath hitched. Silence stretched between them. And then, Jim stood up, towering over her. "Here's how this is going to go. he said, voice dangerously low. You wanted freedom? You got it. But don't expect me to sit here like a fool while you screw around behind my back. Melissa shook her head quickly. No, Jim, it's not like that. Jim chuckled darkly. It's exactly like that. And you're about to find out just how much fun real freedom can be. Melissa stared at him, eyes wide, lips slightly parted. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, she looked scared. And she should be, because Jim was done playing nice. Melissa stared at Jim, her breath catching in her throat. There was something different about him. Something cold, calculated. She had expected anger, a fight, maybe even tears. But instead, Jim stood there, calm, collected, and unreadable. And that terrified her. Jim, we can talk about this, she tried, her voice softer now, trying to regain control. Jim smirked, shaking his head. Oh, we're past talking, sweetheart. Melissa swallowed hard. What does that mean? Jim took a slow step forward, and for the first time Melissa felt trapped. You'll see, Jim murmured. Enjoy your freedom while you can. And with that, he walked past her, heading upstairs. Melissa turned, staring after him, heart pounding. Something wasn't right. Something was very, very wrong. The next few days passed in a blur. Melissa noticed that almost immediately, Jim had changed. He wasn't sulking. He wasn't fighting. He was patient. Too patient. And that scared her. He was still coming home at his usual time, still eating dinner, still sleeping in the spare bedroom, but there was something off in the way he moved. He was too quiet, too controlled. And the worst part? He wasn't asking questions. Melissa had expected resistance. She thought Jim would beg, argue, demand she stop seeing other men. But instead, he just let it happen. And somehow, that was worse. Melissa had no idea she was walking into a trap. It started with little things she didn't notice. Jim casually mentioned that he was working late, something he never did before. Then he started dressing better, smelling better. He even got a haircut. Melissa had spent months fantasizing about being with other men, craving something new, something exciting. But now she found herself wondering what Jim was up to. Melissa's first real jolt of fear came when she saw Jim at a restaurant downtown with another woman. She had been out with Logan, laughing at some joke he made when her eyes flickered across the restaurant and landed on Jim, sitting at the bar, leaning in close to a gorgeous brunette. Melissa felt her stomach drop. What's wrong? Logan asked. Melissa quickly forced a smile, shaking her head. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was something, because for the first time, she realized she wasn't the only one playing this game. Melissa tried to ignore it. She told herself it didn't matter. That Jim was just doing what she wanted him to do. But the discomfort wouldn't leave her, especially when she came home that night, and Jim was nowhere to be found. She texted him. No response. She called. Straight to voicemail. Melissa hated the way her chest tightened. Where was he? The next morning, Jim walked into the house like nothing had happened. Melissa was sitting at the kitchen counter, arms crossed. Where were you last night? She demanded. Jim smirked. Out. Melissa's jaw clenched. With who? Jim chuckled, pouring himself a coffee. That's not really your business, is it? Melissa's stomach twisted. Jim, this isn't. You don't get to ask me questions. Jim interrupted smoothly, turning to face her. Remember? You wanted this. Melissa opened her mouth, then shut it, because he was right. And that realization felt like a slap. It started small, a little jealousy, a little doubt. Melissa told herself she was fine, that Jim's dates didn't matter. But then he started disappearing more often, coming home late, laughing at text messages, leaving the house in a freshly pressed suit. And worst of all, he was happier. Melissa had wanted excitement, but instead, she found herself watching her husband and realizing she was the one losing him. The breaking point came when Melissa tried to reach for Jim one night. She had come home late, alone. Logan had been too busy to meet up. For the first time, she felt restless, lonely. She knocked on Jim's door. Can we talk? Jim opened it, looking relaxed, unbothered. Melissa hesitated, then sighed. Jim, I feel like I'm busy, he said, stepping back. And that's when she saw her, the woman, lying in Jim's bed, wearing nothing but the sheets. Melissa's breath caught. You? Jim smirked. You wanted an open marriage, Melissa? Then he shut the door in her face. And for the first time, Melissa felt the weight of what she had done. Melissa tried to pretend she wasn't bothered. But she was. And Jim knew it. The power balance had shifted. She had lost control. And Jim? Jim was just getting started. Melissa sat in the dark living room, her nails digging into her palms. She could still hear the faint sounds of laughter coming from Jim's room. The woman's voice, a soft, sultry giggle, burned into her mind. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was the one who wanted freedom. She was the one who was supposed to be having fun, exploring, feeling powerful. Not Jim. Not her husband. Melissa had expected resistance. Maybe even a bit of jealousy. Not this. Jim was playing the game better than she was. And she hated it. The next morning, Melissa barely touched her coffee. Jim walked into the kitchen, freshly showered, looking refreshed. Like he had no regrets. Melissa's stomach twisted. She had barely slept, replaying the image of that woman in her husband's bed over and over in her mind. Jim poured himself a cup, completely ignoring her. And that was the worst part. She wasn't used to this. Melissa cleared her throat. So, who was she? Jim didn't even look up. Why do you care? Melissa swallowed hard. Jim turned, leaning against the counter, smirking. You're not jealous, are you? Melissa's lips pressed into a thin line. Of course not. Jim chuckled. Good. Because I have another date tonight? Melissa froze. He was taunting her. And for the first time since this started, she didn't want this anymore. Melissa met up with Linda that afternoon, desperate for validation. He's seeing someone, Linda. He's going out every night now, Melissa whispered, gripping her coffee cup. Linda waved a hand dismissively. Let him. He's just trying to get back at you. He'll break soon. Melissa wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe that Jim was just acting out, that he'd come crawling back, begging for things to go back to normal. But deep down, she knew the truth. Jim wasn't breaking. She was. Melissa tried to salvage her fun. She went out with Logan, went home with Brian, but it wasn't the same anymore. She found herself checking her phone more often, wondering where Jim was, who he was with. One night, she came home earlier than usual, just to see if Jim was there. He wasn't. She waited, and when he finally walked through the door at 3 a.m., looking completely unbothered, something inside her snapped. Jim. He looked up, raising an eyebrow. Melissa hesitated. What was she even going to say? She had no right to be angry, no right to question him, but she wanted to. You're home late, she finally muttered. Jim chuckled. Oh, is that a problem? Melissa flushed. No, I didn't expect you to be out so late. Jim shrugged. Get used to it. Then he walked past her, and Melissa hated the way her chest tightened. Melissa's routine started falling apart. Work wasn't fun anymore. The excitement of dating new men felt empty. She wasn't sleeping well. She wasn't eating much. And Jim? Jim was thriving. He looked better, dressed better, carried himself differently. He even started ignoring her completely. And that hurt more than anything. One night, Melissa got drunk with Linda, trying to drown out her thoughts. Linda kept reassuring her, telling her that Jim was just acting tough, that he'd crack soon. But Melissa wasn't sure anymore, because when she got home, Jim wasn't there, and he didn't come home at all. The next morning, Melissa heard the front door open. Jim walked in, buttoning up his shirt. Her stomach dropped. He wasn't even hiding it anymore. Melissa forced a smirk. Long night? Jim met her gaze, his expression mocking. Very. Melissa felt her face heat. She hated this. She hated feeling powerless. This was supposed to be fun. Why wasn't it fun anymore? A week passed. Then two. Jim continued pulling away. Melissa pretended not to care. But she did. More than she wanted to admit. One night, she tried to reach for him. Literally. She knocked on his bedroom door. Jim opened it, his shirt half unbuttoned, another woman's perfume lingering in the air. Melissa hesitated, her mouth suddenly dry. I miss you, she whispered. Jim tilted his head, amused. You miss me? Melissa nodded. Jim smirked. I thought you wanted freedom? Melissa's chest tightened. I do, Jim took a step closer, lowering his voice. You don't get to miss me, Melissa. Then he shut the door in her face. And for the first time, Melissa truly felt what it meant to lose. Melissa tried to fight it. She tried to pretend she didn't care. But Jim? Jim had won. And deep down, Melissa knew it. One morning, Melissa woke up alone. Jim was gone. And so was his stuff. Her heart slammed at her chest. No, this wasn't happening. He wouldn't leave, would he? Melissa ran through the house, searching. But he was really gone. And the worst part? He didn't even say goodbye. 2 days later, Melissa got a knock at the door. She opened it, only to find a stranger holding an envelope. "Melissa Parker?" the woman asked. Melissa nodded, confused. The woman smiled. "You've been served." Melissa's stomach dropped. She ripped open the envelope, eyes scanning the words, her hands shaking. Petition for the dissolution of marriage. Her vision blurred. This wasn't supposed to happen. Jim was supposed to come back. He was supposed to crawl back to her. But instead, he was leaving her for good. Melissa spiraled. She called Jim. He didn't answer. She texted him. Nothing. It was like he had vanished. Like she didn't exist to him anymore. And that was the worst pain of all. Melissa lost everything. Her marriage. Her stability. Her control. Jim had played the game better than her. And when he finally walked away, he never looked back. Jim sat in a new house, far from the mess he left behind. A fresh start. A life without Melissa. And as he scrolled through his phone, seeing Melissa's desperate texts, he smiled. She had wanted freedom. Now, she had nothing. And Jim had won.